I'm standing in my kitchen in Bedford preparing for my 62nd Thanksgiving. 62. Let that number sink in for a moment. I've cooked 62 turkeys, arranged 62 impeccable tables, created 62 celebrations that looked exactly like what everyone imagines Thanksgiving should be. And this year, for the first time in 6 decades, I'm questioning the entire enterprise. I'm not creating the flawless centerpiece I've taught millions of people to make. I'm not polishing the crystal silver until it gleams. I'm not even using my grandmother's china, which frankly is getting too heavy to lift anyway, because this year I finally understood something that took me 84 years and one federal prison sentence to figure out. I spent my entire career teaching people how to create the perfect Thanksgiving, exhaustively, meticulously, with charts and timelines and temperature guidelines, but I never taught anyone how to navigate an empty one. And for millions of people my age, the table is getting emptier every year, not because they can't execute a proper brine or achieve the correct internal temperature, but because they no longer have anyone worth cooking for. So this Thanksgiving, I'm going to tell you something candid. Something that won't look good on Instagram, though let's be honest, at 84, I've stopped caring what looks good on Instagram. Something that might make you uncomfortable. But if you're over 60, if you've noticed the chairs around your table slowly disappearing year after year, if you've felt that peculiar melancholy of preparing elaborate meals for diminishing audiences, then you need to hear this. Because gratitude, actual gratitude, has nothing to do with the perfect table, and everything to do with what you do when perfection is no longer an option. Let me take you back to November 2004, Thanksgiving at Alderson Federal Prison Camp in West Virginia. You want to know what my table looked like that year? A metal institutional table in a cafeteria that smelled like industrial cleaner and institutional despair. No Wedgwood, obviously. No hand-pressed Belgian linen napkins. No centerpiece featuring seasonal elements artfully arranged according to principles of balance and proportion. Just a beige plastic tray with turkey that had been cooked approximately 17 hours too long, stuffing from a box that probably cost 89 cents, cranberry sauce from a can, the kind of meal that would have sent me into paroxysms of horror just months earlier. I sat down at that table surrounded by women society had efficiently discarded, drug offenders, embezzlers, women who'd made catastrophic choices or simply had catastrophically bad luck, and something unexpected happened. We laughed. We shared stories. We passed around contraband hot sauce packets someone had cleverly smuggled from the kitchen because even in prison, proper seasoning matters. And for the first time in perhaps 20 years of hosting elaborate Thanksgiving celebrations that could have been photographed for Architectural Digest, I felt actual gratitude, not performed gratitude for the cameras. Not the kind where you orchestrate a moment around the table and everyone delivers their prepared statement while the Parker House rolls get cold, but genuine, almost shocking gratitude for simply being alive, being relatively functional, being in the presence of other human beings who saw me as Martha, not as Martha Stewart, Incorporated. That Thanksgiving haunts me, though perhaps haunts is too dramatic. Let's say it recurs to me every year since, when I'm back in my perfectly appointed dining room with my precisely calibrated menu and my coordinated table linens. I think about that metal table in West Virginia, and I think about the complication I'd been creating for decades. The beautiful, profitable, extraordinarily successful complication that Thanksgiving requires perfection. That gratitude means having everything arranged just so. that the holiday succeeds or fails based on whether the table could be published. I built an empire on that premise, and I'm not apologizing for it, but I am noticing at 84, with 62 Thanksgivings providing considerable data, that the ones which taught me nothing substantive about gratitude were the perfect ones. The ones that actually altered something in my understanding were the disasters. Now, I need to clarify something, and this might complicate the narrative for people who followed my work for decades. I didn't sell you a lie, exactly. That's too simplistic and frankly too self-flagellating for my taste. What I sold you was an aspiration, the possibility that with sufficient attention to detail and relentless execution you could create something genuinely beautiful. And that's true. You can. I did it repeatedly. But what I didn't articulate, what I perhaps didn't fully comprehend myself, was the cost of that aspiration, the exhaustion of maintaining those standards year after year, the disappointment when reality inevitably fails to match the vision, the particular loneliness of being surrounded by beauty you created, but experiencing no actual joy in it. I've been having conversations recently with readers my age, women primarily, who spent 4 decades creating those magazine-worthy Thanksgivings, who grew their own herbs and brined heritage breed turkeys for 48 hours and hand-calligraphed place cards, who sacrificed enormous amounts of time and resources and energy to create that perfect table year after year. And now they're eating Thanksgiving dinner alone, or with 1 or 2 people instead of 15. Their children are across the country occupied with their own complicated lives. Their marriages ended years ago. Their siblings stopped speaking to them over some tedious inheritance dispute. Their parents are long deceased. The friends they used to celebrate with have relocated to retirement communities in Arizona or aren't sufficiently mobile anymore. And these women, these exceptionally capable women who can execute a flawless 7-course meal practically unconscious, they're sitting at their perfectly set tables feeling like failures. Not because they failed at cooking. They didn't. But because somewhere along the way they believed, we all believed, that if you create enough beauty and abundance, the people will come. The family will gather. The gratitude will flow naturally, but that's not how life actually operates. Life operates like this. People leave. People die. People divorce. People relocate. People become busy. People drift away. And no amount of perfectly executed bechamel sauce will prevent that from happening, which is unfortunate because I make an excellent bechamel. I'm going to tell you what nobody wants to articulate openly. Our generation, those of us in our 60s, 70s, 80s, we're experiencing Thanksgiving in a fundamentally different way than we experienced it at 35 or 45. And it's not merely that we're chronologically older, it's that the entire infrastructure of our lives has transformed. The family structures we constructed, often with considerable effort, they're dissolving or evolving into forms we don't recognize or simply not appearing anymore. And we're supposed to pretend that's perfectly fine, that we're just grateful for our health and our homes and our accumulated memories. But here's what I actually think. I think our understanding of gratitude has been completely distorted. We've transformed it into a performance, an obligation, something you're required to feel and express regardless of your actual circumstances, as if admitting that Thanksgiving is lonely or disappointing or genuinely painful means you're ungrateful, means you're negative, means you're failing at the basic human task of counting blessings. Exhausting, really. But actual gratitude, the kind that signifies something beyond social performance, has nothing to do with abundance. Real gratitude is what remains when everything else gets stripped away. Let me give you 3 specific examples from my own experience. First, that Thanksgiving in Alderson. I was grateful that day, genuinely grateful, not because my circumstances were favorable. They were objectively terrible. Federal prison is not a destination I'd recommend, but because I was surrounded by women who treated me like a human being instead of a criminal or a celebrity, both of which are reductive categories. That shared cigarette, those contraband seasonings, those stories told across a metal table, that was authentic. Second, some years ago, I woke up disoriented in a hospital after a minor procedure. Nothing dramatic, but I was in considerable pain and profoundly confused about where I was. And my first conscious thought was simply, I'm still here. I'm still functional. And I felt this rush of gratitude so intense, it was almost physical. Not gratitude for anything specific. Not gratitude that the procedure succeeded or that I have excellent insurance. Just gratitude for continued existence, for consciousness, for having another day to work with. Third, and this is going to sound absurd, but it's true, recently I returned home after extensive traveling. Exhausting schedule, multiple time zones, hotel rooms that all achieve the same antiseptic blandness. And when I walked into my house in Bedford, my bulldogs went absolutely insane with joy. Not because I'm Martha Stewart, because I'm their person. And I stood in my entrance hall with 2 dogs jumping enthusiastically, getting muddy paw prints on my Armani jacket, which cost more than most people's monthly rent, and I felt grateful. Grateful for something that loves me without agenda, without calculation, without any interest whatsoever in my net worth or my reputation, or whether I can still create a proper pâte brisée. Those 3 moments, none of them would make good branded content. None of them involve beautiful tablescapes or heritage ingredients or innovative culinary techniques, but they taught me more about actual gratitude than 60 years of perfect Thanksgivings combined. Now here's what I want you to understand and pay attention because this is important. Drop a comment below. 1 word. Type empty if your Thanksgiving table has contracted significantly over the years. Type full if you're still surrounded by substantial numbers of people. I'm curious about the actual data here. And subscribe to this channel because we're going to continue having conversations that most people lack the courage to initiate publicly. Our generation understands something about gratitude that younger people simply cannot yet. Not because we're more intelligent or more evolved, though I like to think we're both, but because we've lived sufficiently long to lose significant things. People we loved deeply. Health we stupidly took for granted. Careers that defined our identities. Physical capabilities we assumed would last indefinitely. Even our relevance in a culture pathologically obsessed with youth and novelty and disruption. And here's the paradox that younger people won't comprehend until they live it. Losing things teaches you what actually mattered. When you're young, you can be grateful for everything because you haven't lost anything substantial yet. You're grateful for your family and your health and your opportunities and your unlimited future. It's remarkably easy to be grateful when you're standing at the beginning of your life looking at infinite possibility. But when you're standing considerably closer to the end, when you've buried parents and sometimes children, when you've survived serious illness, when you've lost positions in marriages and friendships you thought were permanent, when you've watched your physical body betray you in ways you never imagined possible, gratitude becomes significantly more complicated and more authentic because now you know viscerally what it feels like when something disappears. You understand scarcity in a way you couldn't at 30, and that understanding, as genuinely painful as it is, provides access to a deeper level of gratitude. You're not grateful for everything anymore, which frankly was always somewhat dishonest. You're grateful for what remains. And there's something almost brutal about that kind of gratitude. It's not warm or fuzzy. It's not suitable for greeting cards or social media posts. It's more like, I'm grateful I can still walk, even though I require a cane now, which is humiliating but functional. I'm grateful I can still live independently, even though it requires more effort every year. I'm grateful for the two people who still appear, even though I distinctly remember when they were 15. That's actual gratitude, and it's profoundly lonely because you're surrounded by people who don't understand yet, who think gratitude means feeling blessed and fortunate and happy, who haven't learned that sometimes gratitude feels more like grief for what you had and lost, mixed with fierce appreciation for what you still possess, mixed with uncertainty about how long you'll possess it. Rather exhausting, honestly. Stay with me. The practical guidance is coming next, and you'll actually want to hear this part. So let's discuss this Thanksgiving specifically. What are you supposed to do with all this existential complexity? How do you practice real gratitude when your circumstances aren't particularly gratitude-inducing? When your table is significantly smaller than it used to be? When your body hurts in new and creative ways? When your financial situation is less secure than you planned? When you feel invisible and irrelevant and largely forgotten? Here's what I'm going to suggest, and it's probably not what you expect from Martha Stewart. Perhaps this is the year to stop the performance entirely. Stop creating the elaborate theater of the perfect Thanksgiving when the reality is completely different. Stop posting carefully curated photos that suggest everything is wonderful when it categorically isn't. Stop forcing yourself to feel grateful for things you're actually grieving. If you're alone this Thanksgiving, accept it. Really accept it. And identify what's actually true in that solitude. Perhaps it's freedom. Freedom from managing other people's expectations, which is genuinely exhausting. Freedom from cooking for hours when you'd rather not. Freedom from navigating complicated family dynamics. Freedom to eat exactly what you want, when you want, wearing whatever you want. Is that the Thanksgiving you imagined when you were younger? Obviously not. But is there something authentic and possibly even valuable in it? Perhaps. If your family is distant, geographically or emotionally, be grateful you raised people capable of constructing their own independent lives. Even if it's painful that those lives don't include you as centrally as you hoped, you gave them independence. That was the goal. The fact that independence sometimes manifests as distance doesn't negate your success as a parent. If your health is declining, be grateful for every functional day you still have. Don't waste energy being grateful that you're not sicker, which is pointless. Be grateful for what still works. Your mind still functions? Extraordinary. You can still feed yourself. Not everyone can. You can still read, still think, still make autonomous choices about your life. Millions of people your age cannot. If your financial resources are depleting, be grateful for the decades of relative comfort you experienced. Most humans throughout history never had what you had. Most humans alive currently don't have it. You had it. That's statistically significant. Now, I can already anticipate some of you thinking, Martha, this sounds suspiciously like toxic positivity, like you're instructing us to be grateful for inadequate scraps. And I understand that interpretation, But here's what I'm actually suggesting, so listen carefully. Toxic positivity is pretending everything is fine when it demonstrably isn't. Toxic positivity is forcing fake happiness over genuine emotion. What I'm proposing is different. I'm suggesting you identify what's actually genuinely true and worth acknowledging, even if it's small, even if it's not what you wanted, even if it exists alongside real pain and loss. That's not toxic. That's honest. Here's my current practice, what I've implemented in recent years. Every Thanksgiving morning, before any cooking or hosting begins, I sit in my study with my fountain pen and my notebook. Analog, not digital. And I document 3 specific things. First, something I've lost that I'm still actively grieving. I don't minimize it or reframe it positively. I just acknowledge it with precision. This year, I'm grieving that my body no longer obeys my instructions the way it did for 7 decades. I'm grieving that I cannot work 18-hour days like I did routinely for 40 years. I'm grieving that aging is progressing whether I approve of it or not, and I categorically do not approve. Second, something that remains that I'm genuinely grateful for. This year, I'm grateful my cognitive function remains sharp. I'm grateful I can still create, still build, still contribute meaningfully. I'm grateful I have resources and options that many people my age don't have, which is luck and privilege, not virtue. Third, something I'm learning to accept that I cannot change. This year, I'm learning to accept that cultural relevance is inherently temporary, that younger people will replace me and should replace me, that my responsibility is to execute my work with excellence for as long as I'm capable, not to cling desperately to influence and attention like some pathetic aging celebrity. This practice, this honest accounting, has become more important to me than any recipe or entertaining technique I've ever shared, which is saying something, given that I've shared approximately 10,000 of those over the decades. Because here's what I've finally comprehended after 84 years. Gratitude isn't about having a perfect life. It's about having an honest relationship with the life you actually have, not the life you wish you had, not the life you used to have, not the life you think you should have based on what everyone else appears to have. The life you actually have right now with all its complications and disappointments and small graces. And our generation is uniquely positioned to understand this because we've lived long enough to know empirically that nothing is permanent, nothing is guaranteed, and the things you assume will last forever won't. But that knowledge, as heavy as it is also a form of wisdom, because when you know nothing lasts, you stop taking things for granted. You notice things, you appreciate things, not in a performative Instagram way, but in a quiet, private, almost sacred way. You appreciate the morning light in your kitchen. You appreciate that your coffee tastes exactly right. You appreciate that you woke up today with your faculties intact. You appreciate that somewhere in the world, someone still loves you, even if they're not sitting at your table. That's real gratitude. And it's available to you regardless of your circumstances, regardless of whether your Thanksgiving resembles a magazine photograph or a solitary meal eaten in silence. The gratitude isn't in the external circumstances. It's in your willingness to notice what's real, to feel what's true, to acknowledge both the pain and the small graces without trying to transform it into something it's not. So this Thanksgiving, I'm not going to wish you a perfect celebration. I'm not going to hope your table is full and your turkey is moist and your family gets along harmoniously. I'm going to wish you something different and possibly more valuable. I'm going to wish you honesty, the courage to acknowledge what you're actually experiencing instead of what you think you should experience. I'm going to wish you one moment of genuine gratitude for something real, even if it's small. And I'm going to wish you compassion for yourself as you navigate a holiday that's probably considerably more complicated than it appears from the outside, because that's what we actually need now. Not more recipes, though I have plenty if you want them. Not more entertaining techniques. Not more instruction on how to create beauty and perfection. We need permission to be honest. Permission to admit that aging is difficult, that loneliness is real, that Thanksgiving can be painful even when you're supposedly blessed. And we need to know that we're not isolated in feeling this way, that millions of people our age are experiencing similar feelings, similar losses, similar small graces mixed with significant grief. I want to hear from you authentically. In the comments, tell me one thing you're genuinely grateful for this Thanksgiving. Not the obvious answer, not what you think you should say, but something true, something real, even if it's complicated, even if it exists alongside pain. And if this conversation provided something you needed, if it gave you permission to be honest instead of perfect, subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to continue this. Continue having real conversations about what it means to navigate these later years with honesty and dignity, and possibly even grace. Next time, we're discussing what comes after Thanksgiving, after the holidays end, after the performative joy of the season concludes, and you're left with January and February and the long stretch of winter with nothing to celebrate and no occasion demanding false cheer, and how to find meaning and purpose, and even satisfaction when there's no event requiring it. You won't want to miss it. Happy Thanksgiving, the real kind, the honest kind, the kind that includes everything you're actually feeling, not just what looks acceptable on a greeting card.